Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to India Retail Forum 2016 and India Omnichannel Forum 2016. It's been many years of seeing many familiar faces here now, so I'm really glad you braved the weather and joined us today. It is the 13th edition of the annual Mega Retail Intelligence Show, we like to call it, at IRF.
So, given the fact that there are so many familiar faces over here in the audience, why are we here? Plenty of reasons. The consumer landscape has changed, technology has changed, and that change is happening continuously and so fast that there are times when we think we should be meeting twice a year, but for the moment, let's start with just the once.
But there's economic reasons as well. The GDP has been picking up 7.3%. In fact, the more heartening figure for anyone who tracks retail is the kind of retail inflation numbers we got in August, where there was a cool off. So hopefully people and consumption spends are coming back. There's lots of projections, of course, such as how India's economy could be equal to that of Japan and several other developed economies. I know there's many ifs and buts to that, but I think retail is an important cog in that wheel, and these kind of gatherings are an important spot to debate that.
In the last couple of weeks, we've seen a number of newspaper reports that talk once again about India's middle class, that talk once again about what constitutes a middle class in India and what those numbers are. Strangely enough, in the 13 years that I've been at IRF, that number hasn't changed. We're still looking at 250 million people. But that 250 million now has far more spend available to it than it did 13 years ago. So what's that going to mean for the retail sector in the country? Well, for one thing, it's going to mean that retail is going to grow from the $600 billion that it is right now to $1 trillion in just 3 to 4 years' time. We're going to see expansion at 20% year-on-year growth. What's that going to mean? It's going to mean that it's going to take a lot for all of us in this room to navigate the fastest growing retail market in the world.
Also perhaps the trickiest market, because the Indian consumer is very different from any other consumer. We don't do online like the rest of the world does. Indeed, we don't even do brick and mortar like the rest of the world does. As usual, IRF always kicks off with a little bit of prep to just give you a sense of where we are right now and, more importantly, where we could be headed. In order to do that, may I invite on stage Anurag Mathur, who heads Retail and Consumer Goods Practice at PwC India. He's bringing to us the Pricewaterhouse view on what indeed a futuristic look ahead to modern Indian retail could look like. He's an old face, many of you will recognize him, and always got plenty of interesting thoughts to share. Anurag, come on stage, please.
The only reason he is an old face is because he has to bear the burden of presentations like this. He's actually very young.
Thank you very much for that. And okay. So, as he says, the idea is to bear the burden of the topic this year, which was really about saying Foresight to 2020. And I think as we started off on this topic and on this discussion to say, every year we look at saying, what is retail going to move like, dig some research around what are the trends, how it's going to be shaped, what are the numbers going to be looking like. As we started speaking to, retailers, building our research, building down this path, we realized, much like the weather today and the turn that we see here, that it is really hard to predict. It is really, really hard to predict, to say that what is it that retail is going to look like in 2020. And we heard very, very divergent views of, depending on where people were invested in, depending on what business people were in, there was very, very divergent views. So, well, we put together something that we believe at least gives a sense of direction of where the business is heading, and hopefully making sure that all of us really focus on the direction and the right things to do. So I think as we look through this and we ask the question of what would 2020 really look like? Would variables be the thing? Would we be able to see more than what meets the eye? Is this what the future is going to be like? Is it going to be a large variables market? Is it going to be about augmented reality? Is it going to be consumers floating in that space and looking to shop in that space? Is it going to be chip enabled? Is it going to be personalized to the extent of every human being? And all of these are real technologies today that are in play in the market, but question is, will it be really large? We talk about loyalty in India, we talk about loyalty programs in India. Will every individual human being be a loyalty program for himself? To say that we will customize everything to the extent of having that done through chips body. Healthcare is, and healthcare retail and healthcare per se is moving more and more in this direction of trying to say that we understand and be able to customize things as far as possible into individual human beings. Will the driverless car rule our roads? Well, only a very few years back, or possibly even very few months back, not many of us could have said that the driverless cars will actually be a large force on the road. Today, they are in commercial application. They are there in places where safe driving potentially can be tested, but they are coming out onto the roads. They are coming out in commercial applications. Is that something that we will see by 2020? Probably more. Will the robos rule our world? There is already today reported $43 billion of spending on robotics that is happening in the world, right? And growing every year, almost set to double every year. It is moving out from the back end of the business with robotics in manufacturing, robotics in shop floors, robotics on the retail floor. I mean, will we see an R2-D2 assistant moving along with us very soon on the retail floor, helping us buy? Maybe. So therefore, we went down the path of saying that can we really predict 2020? I mean, all of these pieces are invisible, but can we really predict 2020? And we said that's, how many of us would have predicted that the top 5 or out of the top 8 companies that you see in Fortune 500, the last 4 years back, 5 of them didn't exist on the charts. 5 of them are technology companies that we never saw and predicted would be there in 2015. In 2010, none of these predictions were on the table to have them. So, really looking out 5 years, can we predict this? Online retail in 2011, by most projections, was set to reach about 1.5 billion in 2015. In what the top 3 retailers or e-tailers, all 3 were larger than 1.5 billion in 2015. And it was not even 20% of the market. So it's already gotten to a very, very large size versus what was predicted. Flipkart's GMV, as reported, was $10 million in 2011, had crossed $4 billion in 2015-16, as reported. At the same time, you had Jabong, which was valued at $500 million a couple of years back, possibly less than $70 million today. So it is a very erratic space that we are living in. Mobile. We all saw that mobile was coming, mobile was becoming large. And, Tali mentioned, Indians are shopping differently. Indians are, the whole pace of mobile in India is very different to anywhere else in the world. But even a few years back, with the mobile growth being visible, with mobile transactions being visible, could we say that, 60% of all queries today on shopping, on e-commerce, as well as all shopping-related queries are through mobile. 50% of all travel-related queries. We couldn't see the size of this coming. I mean, 60% YouTube views, 60% job searches. So the mobile is truly our way of life, of shopping, of interacting, of transacting. And we've heard about this. We've built through this over the years, but we couldn't really predict these numbers. Similarly, the number of mobile internet users, the kind of growth in mobile internet subscription growth, the kind of growth in 3G device penetration, and simply the consumption of data. I mean, we are consuming 8.2 crore GB of data, and I tried to Google the number, what it's called, and just put out the zeros out there, and it's a mind-boggling number. 8.2 crore GB of data being generated and consumed every month. So we are simply way beyond any prediction that was made in any of these directions. Or how many could have predicted the newest entrant into the list of top 10 richest Indians? Well, 5 years back, the company was nowhere. Today, it's close to $1 billion FMCG retail business in India. So, sir, it's getting harder and harder to predict since things are changing a lot faster. I think what we're seeing, one, the socio-economic environment is changing really dramatically. Consumer and consumption and what they want to consume, how they want to consume is changing very, very fast. Where, what, and how consumers buy is changing. Of course, there is the piece of buying online, there is a piece of buying on the mobile, there is also the requirements from stores are changing dramatically. The customer journeys of how they shop are changing dramatically. What they, the kind of money they want to pay with or the lack of it that they want to pay with is shifting dramatically. So there is a large shift happening quickly on how consumers want to shop. The products and point of sale are multiplying. And I was referring to a conversation time back. India is right now sitting at roughly about 66 categories per 66 SKUs per FMCG category on an average. Right? As you look at some of the other markets, you have China, which is at 200 plus, the US, which is at 300 plus. And this complexity is not going anywhere. It's only going to increase. The amount of choice is increasing every day. I mean, many of us people, retailers, manufacturers, we are adding to this choice. The only thing we can say with certainty is that this market is going to be large. We had put out a number predicted last year of that overall retail in India by 2020 is going to be $1 trillion, right? Now, $1 trillion, we could be off by a couple of 100 million here and there, and nobody will bat an eyelid, because it's a large market. I think that's the certainty that we are heading towards, that it's a large market. Consumption is set to grow. It is where we are from a macroeconomic standpoint, where we are from a consumption standpoint, where we are from a lot of these socioeconomic factors standpoint, we are set to grow. So let's really try and focus on saying that what are the things that we can predict or what we can look at of what 2020 will be like. Let's look at some of the directional cues of where we are headed. I think firstly, very clearly on whether you look at from a demographics perspective or a socioeconomic perspective, from now to 2020, we will add close to about 65 million people, which is roughly the size of UK. Right? It's a large, growing consumption market, and a lot of these people are being added at the upper ends of the pyramid, which have consumption bandwidth. A very large chunk of our population, 65% of the population is under 35 years of age. I think these numbers are, some of them we are aware of, we talk about, but really the question and the point I wanted to make is that as we look towards 2020 and we look at these directional cues, what are the things we are doing or building towards this? Are we doing really, as retailers or as businesses surrounding retail, are we really making spaces, or are we really catering our journeys? Are we really catering our businesses to what we are seeing in terms of this change? There is a very, very significant rise in the working women workforce population. And then if you look at, for example, some of the businesses like food and grocery, there are big trends of health and wellness, convenience, indulgence. And we personally feel that convenience is a trend that has been underrated some. And it will blow up very, very significantly as you see a significant rise in the rising workforce participation of women. And I would say that most retailers or manufacturers that we spoke to aren't really doing enough about it, aren't really doing, yes, there is some convenient packaging, yes, there is some convenient ways of shopping omni-channel, but really it stops there. Time-starved. I mean, as you look at the population, yes, there will be a large population, there will be a young population. Also, there will be a large chunk of aging population. So the interesting thing to me is that as compared to the rest of the world, of course, we are not the largest aging population in the world, but given our sheer size, we are talking about 100 million people above 65 years of age, which is a large set of population by any stretch. And I would say, India has been traditionally a market where we've never really had products, we've never really had services, we've never really had a focus on our aged, on our elderly, on our disabled. Some of these are pieces and markets or micro segments that will start to emerge that businesses need to look at. I mean, just because we are 65% young population doesn't mean that the 100% aging doesn't offer us a large opportunity to break into. It's probably one of the most underserved markets as well. Given size of population, they're all time-starved. I mean, work significantly longer hours, commute for significantly longer hours, as a lot of you would have realized while coming here from the airport or wherever else. The commute is going up, and last year, in fact, here on stage, I heard the ShopClue's founder talk about a term, commute commerce, to say that a large chunk of our business is really sitting on commute commerce, on times when people travel. That's the time that they are shopping the most. How many of us are really leveraging, thinking, looking at these micro time segments, micro consumer segments, micro geography segments to really think about saying how to build the business? Higher complexity, I spoke about. Already the quantum of choice in terms of the number of SKUs, in terms of the number of brand options. And we'd done a research some time back to say that to actually start from thinking about buying or saying that you want a new piece of clothing, to actually buy that piece of clothing, there is almost close to 800 different choice options that you can exercise before you come to a decision of saying that you want an X white shirt or whatever else. So clearly the complexity of decision making with the variety of options has just shot up dramatically. And this is making decisions more and more complex for consumers. The need to connect. I think we've spoken about social media has grown dramatically. The number of users on Facebook, the number of, 50% of internet users are already on Facebook. And also, what is interesting to me, what has emerged from here, and clearly what we can see growing further every year, is that within these large social media groups, there are micro communities that are emerging. Physical micro communities, be it book reading groups, be it single malt appreciation clubs, be it parenting groups. There are a lot of these smaller communities, both physically as well as online, that are forming. And a lot of these are building towards our need to connect. As we have more and more nuclearization, as we have more and more urbanization, the need to connect will only grow because we don't have the family ecosystem that sort of continues to exist. And therefore, the need to connect will grow. And that is something that we need to be, as retailers, as consumers, as manufacturers, need to be looking at to say, how do we service this need better? How do we provide the community as well as connect into this community? The other big force that's shaping is simply, I might call it health and wellness. Right? There is human health. There is a large chunk of diabetic, large chunk of obese population. A lot of people very, very aware of this. Right? Very, very aware of health concerns. Not just personal health. They're also getting very, very concerned about food health. They're saying that they are becoming aware of saying, where do our crops come from? How much chemical goes into it? How much fertilizer are we consuming every day? So they are looking at options like organic. They're looking to change and say that, what is the direction that food is taking, and how can we steer food in, as retailers, manufacturers, how can we steer this in the right direction? Some of it is upon us. If we look at environmental health, one of the data points that clearly heads towards and shows 100% increase in clay Ganpati idols sold this year. Right? People are worried about it. I would say that this is a trend that has been significantly more visible globally than in India. Environmental consciousness has yet not driven consumption choices very aggressively in India, but this is something we are seeing change. Globally, this is a very, very big trend. But in India, it is something that we believe will build up. The consciousness of the environment is growing, and it will start visibly reflecting in consumer choices over a period of time, albeit much slower than some of the others. From a government standpoint, from a policy and regulatory environment standpoint, there is a large shift or shape. GST on one side, which promises to really change the landscape of retail and consumer business dramatically. And GST is not, it's one of the largest disruptions that we would come across in our working life, if I might to say it. That it is a large disruption. It's not just a tax problem. It is a whole business problem, and it is something that is offering us an opportunity to relook at business models. It affects everything for a company, from sourcing down to pricing. Every contract will be renegotiated. Every distribution structure will be rebuilt, including what, where, how. And there is a lot of talk about warehouse placement in separate places, logistics growing. You can see the rally on 3PL stocks since GST has been announced. but there is a lot of not just interest on the logistics and warehousing front, but also how you're going to be competitively positioned post GST. How are you going to be pricing? What is the opportunity leverage that different players take will determine how they will eventually be able to take competitive pricing into the marketplace. That will determine their success over the next 2 to 3, 4 years. So it is a large opportunity, and we are seeing companies being able to move the P&L needle 5 percentage points plus using GST, and which is a large shift. On the other hand, FDI, the government has opened up food retail. There is 100% FDI now allowed in food retailing. Still small steps. There is a lot of murmur about, will it be full retail? Will it be only food? But let me tell you clearly, we've seen interest. There is interest from a fair number of global players. There is a fair amount of interest from and different parts of the world where there is interest in food retail. And how it evolves, only time will tell over the next 5 years. But clearly, if one of these large players or a few of these large players come in and make significant investments, it could change the direction and the numbers that we are talking about very, very significantly. So this is clearly something to watch out for and build business in the back of. Technology, I think, as much as we speak about it, possibly less. Technology dramatically has changed what we have done and become till now, and what we will become over the next couple of years as we look at 2020. I mean, data, I think, is something that fundamentally all of us like to collect data. We like to put more and more systems to collect data, to try and be able to reach it. But I think the struggle as we talk to more retailers, we talk to manufacturers, the struggle that we see is, what do you do with that data? There is just so much being collected in different, whether it's microcosms of data at a store level, whether it is external factors, whether it is qualitative data through social mining and through social listening tools. How do you really start to make sense and derive insights from all of this? Which is something that will be an area of large focus for, there is already a fair amount of analytics play, there is already a fair amount of data building play, if I might, which is happening in the more progressive retailers. But this is something that nobody, whether small or large, will be able to ignore. Data is something that you will have to start to make your decisions based on. You will have to start to make insights being driven from more and more data. And I think the big disconnect to me still remains that how do you use data that's accumulated in a large server or a cloud somewhere centrally and make the store manager or the store associate really change how he behaves at the store to drive that business. That's where the large disconnect to data is. Artificial intelligence, clearly intuitive search, personalized experience, natural language programming. Computers will learn what you want more and more. Potentially, we'll see virtual assistants. Very much, even today, we see the Amazon speaker. We see the Siri, of course, Alexa is the Amazon speaker. We see a lot of, not a lot of, but a move towards artificial intelligence trying to garner, understand consumers much better, being able to respond to that much better, and being built out into commercially applicable, relevant technologies at a price that is affordable for a lot of retailers to offer in their offerings. And over the next 5 years, we see this becoming only more affordable. I mean, if I just look at from a data standpoint, if you look at this data also, just coming back to that point, almost 40 to 50% of this is generated through video and audio, which was not the case even 2 years back. So this large chunk of data that you're seeing is all generated through video and audio. And that mining video for analytics, video analytics, just instead of having a guy sitting at the counter looking at counting the number of people who come at stores, from as simple as that to moving towards to start to sense the color of the color changing of a cauliflower and starting to offer trade promotions based on that to a consumer, the business is evolving, and that is something we see. Or we see like Sixth Sense, where the physical virtual worlds will merge, and consumers are able to look, feel, touch. The whole experience of shopping can change dramatically. Of the ones who don't like to do things online to that extent, and there is still a role of store today, which is different from what the role of store 3, 4, 5 years back was. With the emergence of, if you could start to look, feel, and interact with products on an almost augmented reality basis, it will make a significant difference to the shopping experience, and clearly a big winning for the first movers. And there is also a significant dark side to all of this, right? With data, with access, with online, e-commerce. I mean, some of the things that we didn't have to worry about a few years back, by 2020 will probably become some of the biggest worries for a lot of retailers. Even today, as I was speaking to one of our top cybercrime guys in PwC, and he was telling me after financial services, retail is actually the second most attacked sector in the world. 70% of all consumer-related attacks, consumer data-related attacks happen on retail. But financial services as a business focuses time, energy, money, effort on managing this. They look at saying that, how do we have protocols that are more and more secure? Retail, on the other hand, I mean, we tested 56 apps that are out there in India for different retailers. Big names, small names, 52 of them were vulnerable to cyber threats. And this is a very real threat. There is a large, we've seen something recently at Target, we've seen before. There is a large number of data security, privacy concerns that will really emerge and only grow as we are building up. Data privacy, again, is a significant challenge. All of us are giving up significant amount of data as consumers and collecting a significant amount of data as retailers. How really are we protecting that is a question we need to be asking ourselves. So in response to all of these, really, how is retail evolving? There is blurring of boundaries, clearly. In retail stores, in what consumers want, brick and mortar is clearly getting redefined. The role of the store is going to change dramatically. Be it what you do online versus what you do in store, there will be a lot of blurring of boundaries over there as we look towards that. Customer service, I talked about virtual assistants. Associate knowledge needs to become significantly better. The experience that a consumer is seeking at store is improving, and a lot of retailers are taking steps towards this. More and more customer and more service orientation needs to come out, not just in stores. Also, online can learn a lot from how retailers really lay down their journey and how consumers shop. And offline can learn a lot from how they help navigate through the complexity and help them narrow into a choice. Product flows. I don't think by 2020 we will be able to live in an era of being on our own. Ecosystem and collaboration will be a critical part of life. Automation in the product flow, integrated, seamless systems, supply chain will change dramatically at the back end to try and towards that. The organization will have to be significantly more alert, nimble, proactive, and as I go back to my piece of really, are we able to do things at store? Are we alert to signals that are coming in micro markets, in micro geographies at the store level? Are we proactive about doing something about it, or do we just collect those signals and do nothing with them? And are we really nimble enough to react and make money on a daily basis? So I think just last couple of points that I want you to leave you with, and these are the 5 questions that we believe every organization should be asking themselves as they look to 2020. Are you really aligned to the evolving customer? And it is not just about doing lip service to say that we are doing a few things on social media, we are doing a few things to get on connect with marketing efforts to the consumer. Are you really seeing how the consumer's behavior in your industry, in your sector, and the consumer you're selling to at large is changing and shaping? And are you part of shaping that behavior or not? Are you really aligned to that evolving consumer in terms of as he moves forward looking for your products? Have you defined, or you have a set in motion of at least a set of transformation initiatives that are underway to say that from here to 2020, this business could change dramatically? And frankly, a lot of retailers and a lot of manufacturers we speak to say that, but our business is not going to be affected as much. The fact is, over the last 5 years, it has been. Or over the last 10 years, it has been. And over the next 5 years, it will be. So you need to be in a place where you have in motion a set of transformation initiatives defined. expectations, dedicating adequate time. There is 2 people who've also been given responsibility of saying, please look at our digital. There is a digital person who's been hired at a junior level. There is initiatives that have been pulled out as projects by the company to make boards happy that there is enough stuff happening on this front. But truly, is there adequate time being dedicated? Are the right teams being dedicated? At the top, do we really understand the expectations from what are some of these transformation initiatives meaning? Are you really proacting and thinking about technology, embracing technology? In every question or every solution that you're offering today, are you really thinking about how can technology help me solve this problem better? Is that part of your DNA, or is it the CIO's job? And really, are you working on unified data analytics capabilities to get and make sense of all of these quintillions of data that will really come in and patch themselves? I think these are 5 key questions that I just wanted to leave with to say that, and some of these are fairly obvious. However, as we speak and meet retailers and look at manufacturers, I would say there is a very, very poor uptake, with the answers being yes for all 5 of them. So that is where the challenge lies, and thank you. I think all we can say is 2020 is going to be very, very interesting and very, very large. Any further queries, we'd be happy to take on outside.